1,117 restaurants in 47 states, the biggest full-service restaurant chain in the country. Then, in about 24 months, all of it was gone. Padlocked on ordinary mornings, while people were still sitting in the booths eating, you've heard it was the name. And the name played a part, I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But it wasn't the biggest reason, and neither was the basketball team. There was only ever one real killer here, and it was a single number, put in the wrong column of a ledger back in 1967. So small, nobody noticed it for a decade, while it sat there, quietly counting down. 4 things Sambos did better than almost anyone in America. And the one number, hidden under the best of them, that it never survived. Let's go back to the beginning. It starts on the beach in Santa Barbara. June 17th, 1957. 2 men, a griddle, and a slogan. Sam Battistone, a diner man, son of Italian immigrants who'd run a downtown grill for about 20 years, and a restaurant supply salesman named Noel Bonet. Everybody called him Bo. Sam plus Bo. Sambos. They opened a little pancake house across from the water, about 45 seats, and one idea Battistone said to anyone who would listen. What this country needs is a good 10-cent cup of coffee. Bottomless coffee for a dime, a full breakfast for $1.25, a stack of pancakes tall enough to look like a dare. And we should be honest about the walls, because you remember them. They painted the dining rooms with an old children's story, Little Black Sambo, tigers chasing each other around a tree until they melt into butter. The founders always swore the name was only ever their 2 names. Hold that thought. The name becomes a very loud fight later, and when we get there, I'm going to tell you the truth about how much it actually mattered, which is not what you'd guess. Because the thing that turned this little pancake counter into a national empire wasn't the coffee, and it wasn't the tigers. It was the first thing they did better than anyone. The deal. Here's the problem every restaurant chain in America was losing sleep over. In the 60s. You hire a manager to run a store 2,000 miles from the home office. And you pay him a salary. And a salary is a salary. Store does great, he gets the same check. Store limps, he gets the same check. So why would he sweat the graveyard shift? Why would he treat the place like it was his? Sambo's answer was fraction of the action, and it started around 1967. Prove yourself, and you could put down $20,000 of your own money, and own 20% of the profit of your own store. Not a bonus, not a maybe. 20% in your pocket as long as that store was open, and you could keep going. On top of your own store, you could buy pieces of other people's stores 5% at a time, up to another 30% scattered across the chain. The company kept 50% for itself and sold the rest to the very people flipping the eggs. Think about what that does to a man. Overnight, he isn't an employee, he's an owner. That's his own money on the counter, so suddenly he cares about every single cup of coffee, because every cup is partly his. The best Sambos in the whole company, a store in Oakland, was pulling somewhere between $650,000 and $700,000 a year when the average store did around $337,000. Run 20% on that. That's a fortune for a guy who started on a grill. And the pitch they used to recruit these men was almost too good to be true. Stay with Sambos for 10 years, they told him, and you'll be set for the rest of your life. In 1967, nobody was offering that to a restaurant manager. That was the promise that used to come with a union card. Show up, do the work, and the work takes care of you someday. Sambo's was making it over a flat-top griddle, and men came running. And picture what that man's day actually looked like. Up before 4, in the building before the night cook has even gone home. Signing for the egg delivery himself, because the money on that counter is his. On the floor through the breakfast rush, back out front for the dinner crowd, standing there at 11 at night, doing the math on whether to keep 2 people on the graveyard shift or 1. Nobody made him do any of that. He did it because a piece of the place was his, and a man treats a thing he owns differently than a thing he's paid to babysit. That was the whole genius of it. Remember that feeling, because in a little while, somebody is going to take it away from him in a single afternoon. So keep that $20,000 in your hand for the rest of this, because everything good you're about to see was built on it, and so was the bomb. The deal made the managers hungry. But hungry managers still need something to sell, and that's the second thing Sambo's did better than almost anyone. And this is the part you actually remember, if you're over 50, because you were there for it. You know the vinyl booth. You know the heavy diner mug that never seemed to hit empty. You know the strange comfort of walking into a place at some hour when no respectable restaurant should be open, and it's open, and it's warm, and there's coffee. Sambo's ran the restaurants 24 hours a day. 1 kitchen, 1 crew, feeding 4 completely different crowds off the same grill. The breakfast people at 7. The lunch rush at noon. Families at dinner over steaks and chops and fried chicken. And then the crowd nobody else wanted. The after the bar's close crowd needing pancakes and a booth that wasn't the front seat of their car. Every one of those hours was money, and Sambo's took all of them. Ask anybody who ate there and they'll tell you it sat about a half notch above a Denny's. Never fancy, just clean, bright, cheap, and always open. And you've got your own version of it, don't you? A Saturday morning with the kids climbing all over the booth and syrup on everything. Or a long night drive where the Sambo's sign was the only thing lit for miles. Or the graveyard shift itself, the truckers and the cops, and the kids coming down off a Friday night, all of them in the same warm room at 3 in the morning. Because there was nowhere else on earth to be. That room was open, when the rest of the country was dark. For a lot of people that meant something. Which is the third thing. And the hours weren't even the cheapest trick they had. The price. Remember Battistone's whole religion. A good 10-cent cup of coffee. That wasn't a stunt. It was the soul of the place, and they held it like grim death. Coffee for a dime. Pancakes for pocket change. Breakfast for $1.25. And in the early years, they barely raised prices at all. They loved that dime coffee so much that by 1969 the company bragged it sold enough of it every single day to float a 45-foot yacht. On dimes. That's the whole trick. In one line. They built an empire a dime at a time, and they made you feel like you were the one getting away with something. You probably still know the little wooden nickels, good for a cup of coffee, handed out like candy. And none of it. Not the deal, not the round-the-clock hours, not the dime coffee, none of it could have gone national. Without the fourth thing, the one you never actually saw from your booth. Sambo's ran everything out of one central kitchen in Santa Barbara. Same menu shipped coast to coast, so a stack of pancakes in Ohio matched a stack in California. And because they'd figured out how to make the people who owned the land pay to put up the buildings, the cost to open a brand new restaurant was only around $10,000. 10 grand to plant another flag. That is almost nothing. That's how you carpet a country in 20 years. So line them up. A deal that turned cooks into owners. A round-the-clock format that caught every meal of the day. A price so low it felt like a favor. And a supply machine that opened new stores for the cost of a used car. 4 things, every one of them ahead of the pack. And it all worked. It worked so well it's almost hard to believe, so let me show you the numbers, and then let me show you how fast numbers like these can turn into nothing. 1 restaurant in 1957. 98 by 1969. 712 by 1976. And at the top, in 1979, 1,117 restaurants in 47 states. There were towns of 8,000 people with a Sambo sitting on the main road in. Company income climbed from about $1 million in 1967 to $22.8 million 10 years later. The stock went on the New York Stock Exchange and Wall Street fell in love. And here is where that basketball team comes in, so let me get it out of the way, because a lot of people want it to be the villain. In 1974, the founder's son led a group that paid a little over $6 million for an NBA franchise, the New Orleans Jazz. The team you know today as the Utah Jazz. Yes, pancake money bought an NBA team, and yes, that team lost money every year, and the family poured a fortune into it. Something in the range of $17 million over the years, and the son, who should have been minding the empire, was flying to games instead. It's a great story. It drained the family's personal reserve. Circle it if you want to, but be careful, because this is the first decoy. The basketball team is why there was no cushion left at the top when the crash came. It is not why the crash came. Not even close. Keep that straight, because in a minute I'm going to show you what actually pulled the trigger, and it has nothing to do with sports. Quick thing before the floor drops out of this story: if you're into these, the vanished ones, the chains that were everywhere and then just weren't, hit subscribe. I dig one up every week. All right, back to it. Because everything you just watched climb, the stores, the states, the stock, all of it was balanced on that $20,000. And that number had something wrong with it. From the very first day. Go back to that $20,000 a manager put on the counter to buy into his store. Simple question. Where did that money go, and what did the company call it? It went to the company, and the company wrote it down as income, as profit, as money it had earned. Sit with that for 1 second, because it is the entire ball game, and it's the single number I've been promising you. That 20 grand wasn't the company's money. It was the manager's money, parked in the company's profit column. And every time Sambo's opened another store and signed another manager and took another $20,000, the profits went up. So the growth was paying for the growth. On paper, the company looked healthier every year, and the healthier it looked, the more it grew, and the more it grew, the healthier it looked. You see the trap now? A machine wired like that only runs one direction. Downhill faster forever. You have to open more stores this year than last year and sign more new managers than last year just to keep the profits climbing. Slow down for a single season and the fresh checks stop and the whole thing stalls. That is not a restaurant company. That is a chain letter with pancakes. And in 1977, the government finally opened the books. The Securities and Exchange Commission looked at how Sambo's was counting that manager money, and their finding was quiet, and it was fatal. That $20,000 was never income. It was a deposit. It was somebody else's money sitting in the profit column for 10 years, making the whole company look far stronger than it was. And a company whose reported profits depend on signing the next guy, and the next guy after him has a name. It's a pyramid. And that is more or less what they called it. So Sambo's had to do the one thing the entire company was built never to do. Stop. In 1978, they killed fraction of the action, and they restated their profits downward, which is the polite way of saying they had to walk out in front of their own investors and their own lenders and admit that a decade of earnings had been partly a mirage. And they started buying the managers back out, handing their money back at a number picked in Santa Barbara without asking them. Now watch the money, the instant you pull that thread. 1977, the last full year of the deal, $22.8 million in income. 1978, the first year without it, $7.6 million. 1979, the biggest the company would ever be, and a loss of roughly $50 million. Same buildings, same booths, same 21 kinds of pancakes. The only thing that changed was the number in that one column, and the human half was worse. Stand in a restaurant in 1978 and be the man who put his $20,000 down. Head office tells you the plan is over. We're buying you out, and here's what we've decided your piece is worth. The thing that had you counting egg cases at 5 in the morning for 11 years is being handed back at a price you didn't get a vote on. Within 6 months of that, half the managers quit. Half in the end, something like 700 of them, around 70% of the people running these restaurants, either walked or went to court. One of them, a manager up in Portland, sued for fraud. And a jury looked at the deal this company had offered its own people and agreed. They called it fraud and awarded him $925,000. And every buyout and every settlement cost money the company no longer had because now it was paying to push owners out the door, instead of collecting checks from owners fighting to get in. The engine wasn't just off, it was running in reverse, pumping the tank dry. Now, the name. I promised you the truth on this, so here it is, and it's the second decoy. The name was real, and it did real damage. For 20 years, it barely caused a ripple on the West Coast, where the chain grew up. Then in the 70s, the company pushed east, into New England and the Midwest, into cities with completely different histories, and the name landed like a slap. There were protests and lawsuits. Civil rights groups pushed hard, and a state human rights commission ruled that the name had the effect of telling black customers, in plain terms, that they weren't welcome. That objection was fair, and it was true, and it cost the company real money, permits, and lawyers, and years fighting city councils, and every driver who saw the sign and would not pull in. So here's the part I want you to actually hang on to. All of that is documented, and it belongs in the story. The name hurt this company badly, and it hurt real people worse. And it is still not what closed the store in Boise where nobody ever filed a thing. Both are true at the same time. The name contributed, it was just never the biggest reason. The company was already bleeding to death from an accounting decision made in 1967, and the name was the wound everybody could see. It was the loud, easy answer, and it let the arithmetic off the hook. The company thrashed. First, it refused to change the name at all. Then it panicked and started changing it, but only in some places, to the Jolly Tiger, then reversed and changed them back, then tried again with No Place Like Sam's. 20 years teaching a country one name, smeared into 3 or 4 names depending on which state you were standing in, right as the money ran out. Nobody could tell what a Sambo's even was anymore. And by then, the company was a mess in a dozen smaller ways. Two former executives got indicted in a cattle kickback scheme out of Texas. There were health complaints, rodents, the sort of thing that only makes the papers once a company is already on the floor, across 1980 and 1981 together. Sambo's lost nearly $9 million more. But understand what all of that actually was. Symptoms. A company losing money this fast attracts bad decisions and ugly headlines the way a warm room attracts flies. But none of it was the cause. It was all symptom. The cause was still that one number, sitting in that one column since 1967. And then it was over, fast. Starting November 9th, 1981, 447 restaurants closed. 9,000 to 10,000 people out of work in about 3 weeks. On November 27th, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, still running 667 restaurants in 46 states on the day it filed. The stock exchange suspended the stock. The last price it ever traded at was $1.75. Somebody tried the obvious rescue. By early 1983, 618 of the survivors had been renamed Seasons, same building, Same booths, same griddle. Brand new sign carrying a word nobody in town had ever heard. It didn't take, because you can't hand a man a new sign and expect his Sunday habit to survive it. He'd pulled into that lot for 18 years. Now the sign says something strange, and the manager who knew his order left 3 years ago, so he stops coming. And once he stops, he never starts again. By the mid-'80s, it was gutted. Some of the buildings just sat there, empty. One sat empty and lonely enough that when Tim Burton needed a sad, abandoned diner for a scene in Edward Scissorhands, he shot it inside a dead Sambo's. That's what was left of the biggest restaurant company in America. A ghost with a good parking lot. Except for one. The very first one, on the beach in Santa Barbara, never closed. The son bought it back personally. The one building in the whole chain that never once changed its name. Around 1998, the founder's grandson, Chad Stevens, took it over and did the opposite of hiding. He kept the murals, kept the old menu, sold replica wooden nickels. And then in the summer of 2020, with the whole country reckoning with exactly the imagery that name carried, a petition gathered thousands of signatures, and Stevens agreed. On July 14th, the name came down for good, and the place became Chad's, on the same sign base that had stood on that corner since 1957. 63 years, almost to the month, from that first 10-cent cup of coffee. So here's the whole thing, stripped of the noise. The name hurt them, but it didn't kill them. Neither did the basketball team. Those are the loud answers, and they're comforting because they make this a story about scandal. But a beloved, profitable chain with 1,100 restaurants doesn't die of scandal. It died because in 1967, somebody wrote one number in the wrong column, and for 10 years, everybody was getting too rich to ask what that number really was. The day they finally asked, it emptied the entire company in about 24 months. And if you ever sat in one of those booths as a kid with a tiger on the wall and a plate of pancakes and a dad who could feed the whole family for a few bucks, you never saw a bit of it. You just saw breakfast. Nobody in that booth ever knew the place was running on a countdown. Well, now you do.